Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm there. What location are you in?
I'm in Connecticut right now. So,
Oh, that's right. You were telling me yesterday. Okay, my bad. I was getting
yeah.
the details mixed up because we were talking about Massachusetts.
Right. And I can tell you one thing, Massachusetts is very, you know, that. Um, but no, Connecticut's a little bit different. We got a lot of working class neighborhoods around here. I'd say Connecticut's more like Pennsylvania. I would say in the past, the only reason why we voted Democrat is because Democrats used to be the party of the working class. They're really not anymore. Let's just keep it real. Um, but you mentioned the
Oh, for
Catholic
sure.
Connor. We love the Catholic Church out here. There's a lot of Italians, a lot of Poles, a lot of Irish out here, all in my bloodline. I've got some from my Polish side. I've got a little Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry. I'm not Jewish, obviously. That's just a very common thing, though, among Slavic people. We tend to have some of that left over. But yeah. And then
Oh, for sure.
Is Colorado really a right wing state? I mean, the only right winger I see from Colorado is like Lauren Boebert, and I wouldn't even say she's a real conservative. I'm sorry. I don't think jerking off guys in a movie theater is very conservative and Christian, if I may say so myself.
No, no. And she's pretty negatively. Yeah, I mean, she's pretty negatively regarded here. A lot of us don't like her. What I would say is that Colorado Springs is very conservative. That's like one of the most like evangelical places in America, and so you get a lot of that influence.
Yeah.
Denver is not, unless you kind of go more like south. Like the Catholic Church in this state is very very strong, but it's kind of like out in Oregon. It's like the church here is doing really well, but it's still a very liberal state, and so like if you go to Denver, it's crazy.
Right, right. So now to the audience, and obviously Connor, as you know, we're not going live right now. You guys might remember him. This is Connor from Mehdi Hassan's Jubilee Surrounded Debate. Welcome, bro. One of the reasons why I really wanted to reach out to you to have you back
Great
on,
to be here.
I don't think we got to hear from you enough. And I was just saying earlier before we started the recording, guys, I was watching Connor more than I was watching the other debaters because he had such a good moment up there with Mehdi. And I was sitting there and I'm like, when they got to the other sections, they got to talking about immigration. They got to talking about the Israel-Gaza conflict. They got to talking about a lot of geopolitical events. We didn't get to hear from Connor enough. And I was sitting there the whole time. And I'm like, is he going to make it to the chair? Nope, he didn't make it to the chair. Is he going to make it to the chair? No, he didn't make it to the chair, So I was sitting there on the edge of my seat watching the Patriots game or the New York Yankees game. And we do that up here in New England too. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I want to hear more from this guy. I want to hear more from this guy. So I'm really glad to have you back. So I'll turn it over to you a bit, man. Where would you say on the socio-political spectrum you fall? What would your beliefs correspond with whichever label you would give yourself?
I mean, I really like to refer to myself just as a Catholic, and I guess to make it a little bit more specific, I would also call myself a white identitarian, not a like white nationalist. A lot of people get those two terms confused or equivocate them. I'm not someone who wants to make like America into an ethno state. I just want to preserve the demographics of America being, historically a majority white country, and really doing what is best for white people, because race is a extended kinship. It's an extended family. And I would expect that every single group of people on earth wants to do what's best for their race. But that doesn't mean that you want to harm other races of people or do anything that's discriminatory or, sort of coming from a hateful place, I guess you could say.
Right.
So for me, even even that ideology or that idea is still through a Catholic lens. Everything I do and believe in is through my faith. That's the foundation of my worldview. I've almost gotten to the point where I don't like to call myself certain ideologies anymore, because I feel like people then start to put that ideology out ahead of their Catholicism. And for me, it's just the faith. It's my obsession. It's what I care about. And it's the whole sort of axis by which my worldview operates.
Okay, I got you. So today, right? I would consider myself more of a, I guess you could say, and I hate this term too, but more of a passport bro. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with our movement. I would be more along the lines. I guess right now I'm trying to get wealthy, but I'm a bit more of a budget version of these guys. I'm more of like the budget version of Andrew Tate, Casey Redbeard, Myron Gaines, those kinds of guys. The problem I see with the West, and I want to know if this is what you see as well, right? Trying to maintain, like you said, not a white ethno state, but just preserving white culture in America, preserving it, I would assume, across the West as well. Like, would you also be concerned, for example, with what's going on in France with the massive influx of African immigrants, or Germany with the massive influx of Turkish or Arab immigrants, like their culture being erased too? Or maybe Canada with the massive influx of Indian immigrants. Today, though, you'd be conservative, I'd be conservative as well, but I just think we're different branches of the conservative movement. Is any sort of nationalism, whether it's white nationalism, Catholic nationalism, is any of that practical? Because when you look at the most feminized nations in the West, it's the United States, it's Canada, it's France, it's Germany, it's England. These are the cultures that say to women, don't, as Charlie Kirk would say, go for the Mrs. degree, right? Don't do that. You know, sleep around and fuck a bunch of guys, as many as you want throughout your 20s, throw your youth away. And then by the time you're 35 and you can only even have one kid anymore, then get married and have a kid. If that. That's the rhetoric coming from Western countries. When I look at all of the non-Western countries, when I look at Latin America, when I look at Africa, when I look at Muslim countries in the Middle East, I guess you could say the only white countries I would see any sort of traditionalism from is Eastern Europe, like Russia, Ukraine, and we'll get into Russia, Ukraine. I'd say Ukraine is now turning into a neoliberal Western cesspool as well. Of course, Asian countries, China, India. These are the countries that, ironically, the least white countries, the least Christian countries, tend to have the most traditionalism. And the most white countries, the most Western countries, these tend to have the least traditionalism. These tend to have the least amount of high birth rates. These tend to have the least amount of familial commitment. And that's why you have folks like myself and like other people that I'm influenced by literally leaving the country to find women, very often of other ethnic groups, Asian women, Hispanic women, meeting them. Because, look, they're a lot easier. They are a lot more desirable to want to make your future wife, to want to start a family with in the first place, than a lot of these white girls out here in America are, right? So from your perspective, is any sort of the ideology that you're fighting for here, is that still practical? Because the left has just so completely inundated and in such a parasitical manner swept in and almost has like this toxoplasmosis of the brain on the West. How does that work?
So what I would say is that we're not going to save the West, or we're not going to save sort of Western society if we have this retreatist mentality, or that things have gotten too hard. I mean, really the reason why majority white countries currently are liberal is because they've forgotten their own tradition. And the only way that can be saved is if they become Catholic again. A lot of people say, well, how is it realistic for these nations to become Catholic again? If we were able to convert the entire Roman Empire through, 12 apostles, many of which were tax collectors and fishermen, and spread that faith over the entirety of the West and completely define Western culture by it, then this is nothing. I mean, we still have that history and that heritage. All we have to do is recapture it. And I think the way that we do that is through what St. John Paul II termed the new evangelism, right? The new evangelization. This idea of re-evangelizing cultures that had once been predominantly Catholic back into the fold of the faith by engaging sort of the, atheistic, secularistic, agnostic worldviews that these people believe in, and overcoming them with the light of Jesus Christ. And I've seen this take place very thoroughly already in many people's lives. I mean, white people in America, white Catholics especially, are just going to outbreed liberals, right? It's a 10-to-1 ratio. It's like these white families are having like 10 kids, whereas these liberal families, I mean, they don't even get married. They almost contracept their entire lives. And if they do get married, they have one kid, And I think you can even see, like, in a case study of like Destiny's family, for instance. I mean, his son is completely rejecting sort of the, you know, sort of liberal upbringing that his father inundated him with, right? That his parents inundated him with. So even their kids are turning away from that sort of heritage. I know what we're up against is very monumental. I know that there is going to be a lot of kind of interim difficulties and obstacles to overcome. But considering that when we look in sort of the scope of history and we see this rise and fall of civilizations, that a lot of people came out on the other side and they were able to build sort of out of the ashes even better than what came before. I think that there's a lot of hope and potential for that to happen again with the West and specifically white people, but only if they accept the Catholic faith. No other ideology is going to do it, not Stoicism, not even just like general right-wing politics. It has to specifically be Christ. That's the only thing that's going to save the West.
Right. And I do have a question in here later on about, because I noticed so many of you guys that are, white Americans on the right wing. A lot of you guys, I've noticed yourself, you had Sarah Stock in there, you had Nick Fuentes. God, I'm trying to remember. There's Thomas Sowell, but I think he's Australian, so I don't think he would necessarily quite play into this. I mean, we could also have a global outlook on it as well. I am curious why Catholicism has overtook evangelicalism or Protestantism so much. I think even he's kind of like the grandpa of you guys' movement now, but David Duke from the KKK, I think he recently converted to Catholicism. I don't know if he always was Catholic, but yeah, he did.
He did actually convert to Catholicism.
Yeah, I looked it up the other day before I knew I would have you on, and I found out that David Duke just became Catholic.
Oh wow!
I think though a lot of the
that's very unique.
Yeah, because a lot of the white nationalists, you look at them, we're talking like the 60s, 70s. We're talking the old guys, right? They were Protestant, a lot of them. They were evangelicals from the South or something like that. So that's definitely been a unique change I've noticed. You did mention birth rates. One of the other thing, though, and you acknowledge this is a monumental battle you guys are up against, but Latinos come here from Latin America. By the way, they are also Catholic, but I would assume they're a different branch of Catholicism than where you guys stand, right?
Well, actually, Latinos, the people who come here over the border are not really Catholic by any metric. Even if they were born and baptized in the church, a lot of them actually leave the church for either agnosticism or really sort of evangelical religion. So they have a very low retention rate in the church, and even when they are Catholic, they're extremely lapsed. They don't really believe anything the church teaches.
So it's different. Okay. But then you also have, so regardless though, right? You have them, you have Arabs, Muslims in general. You have African immigrants. These are not African Americans, right? African immigrants I'm talking about.
Right.
Not so much a high birth rate, but you have a lot of Chinese and Indian immigrants, Asian immigrants. They also altogether tend to have high birth rates too. I agree with you. What you said about liberalism, absolutely true. And that's particularly with the LGBT movement and the feminist movement that's swept through their ideology, right? That teaches that, women can be free. We don't need to, be committed wives or mothers and things of that nature. Or, whether it's big pharma wanting their checks so they can go inject hormones into young children to push the transgender ideology, or whether these people were genuinely trans, right? We don't know. Or whether through liberalism they had that ideology pushed on them. The point is, what you said about liberals is true. They have very low birth rates. But you guys, though, in your movement having high birth rates, and as well as a lot of these other traditional ethnic movements having high birth rates as well, how can you compete, right? So, for example, a Muslim family might come here from, say, Syria. They've also got 10 kids per family. A Mexican family or a Venezuelan family might come here. They've also got 10 kids per family on average. Who's going to outrace who, basically? Like, what's the strategy there?
Well, admittedly, on a global scale, I don't see it as a competition because, if another race has a high birth rate, I don't see that as being necessarily competitive with our own. But in the context of this country, like a certain right, ethnic group having a high birth rate in this country. I would say that if someone is not American, if they're not traditionally a part of this nation, a part of the fabric of this nation, uh, they will need to go back to the original nation that they came from. And the reason why is not because they're necessarily bad people or anything like
Right.
that, but if we want this country to continue to be America, it has to be Americans that live here, right? And that does not mean that all Americans or all true Americans are white. There's many ethnic groups that have had, you know, a long history in this country and are as much American as you know, a white person who's, you know, gotten off the Mayflower. Their family has like roots in the, you know, kind of pre-Ellis Island era or what have you, very much so. But what I would say is that for people who are coming here, you know, kind of after the Hart-Celler Act, and especially now, they do need to go back to the country that they came from, not because they're bad people or that there's any sort of just hatred towards them, but it's that they are going to change the composition of what this country looks like. If I brought a lot of white people to Ethiopia, right, and we started having a predominantly high birth rate and we started to affect the demographics of Ethiopia, it wouldn't be Ethiopia anymore. And so when that happens to a white country, it's like we need to return to what the actual demographic is in order to preserve the cultural and ethnic and racial character of that country, because then it's just simply not going to be America. It's going to be an entirely different nation.
Right. How do you go about that? I mean, because you would need to have a lot of people with your ideology in power. I mean, even Trump, who I would argue, well, let's be honest, George Bush is the worst president we've ever had. George Bush was atrocious. Let's just be honest about that right off the bat. George Bush fucking sucked. But even someone like Trump, you know, would you say he's gone far enough for where people in your movement would want him to go? Like how do you get to that point?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Right. So how do you get to that point where all these people would be deported? Is it practical? Is it feasible? You know, can you accomplish that?
I would say so.
Yep.
I mean, it kind of depends on how these people are coming, right? So if it's someone who's illegal, it's like just kick them out. Like there doesn't need to be this really process. It's like they just need to be kicked out. They're not, you know, they didn't even play by the rules as they were laid out, right? And so they're committing a crime in doing that. Now, when, of course, those people are deported, I think deportation should always be ethical, right? We're not talking about just like hurting people or what have you, but, you know, those people do need to be deported back to where they came from originally, since they have broken the law. Now, for people that, you know, maybe they went through the channels as they were set up of sort of the immigration process in America, what I would say to those people is we would have to incentivize them to maybe go back to the original country they were from, whether that's through sort of an economic incentive or sort of the remigration plan that many European identitarians have talked about, where, you know, you do kind of create this incentive for people to go back, you know, offering them plane trips, maybe a small stipend or what have you, so they can go back and hopefully maybe even improve the lives of their own country so that those countries become far more livable and they become a place where people want to make better rather than escape.
Okay. Now, you did mention the post Ellis Island immigrants. You're talking about me, actually. So my family, well,
Right.
my grandmother, I could even show you my ancestry.com test. I'm not sure if I should have given the government my DNA. But my grandmother, her family came here in the 1600s. She traces her ancestry back to England, Ireland, and Scotland from the Mayflower. As for my other three grandparents, so on my mom's side, both my grandparents, the children of Polish and Italian Catholic immigrants. On my dad's side, my grandpa, his parents were Orthodox Jews. Then he married my grandma, who was, I think she was raised either Quaker or Episcopalian. So she was Protestant. And then they actually ended up disowning him because he didn't, you know, marry a Jewish woman, yada, yada, yada. A lot of problems there. But
Wow.
yeah, I know. And I thought Christians were the bigoted ones. I thought, you know, Christians were the bad guys, by the way. That's interesting. Reverse the roles, and I think there'd be a lot more outcry over that. But So what would you say to the white Americans in your plan that are descendants of the Ellis Island immigrants? Would they fit in, or are we going back to the 1600
Uh,
pre-colonial?
oh, yeah. If I misspoke, I don't want to deport anyone who got here during Ellis Island,
Okay.
because that's when this country was still being set up. So I'm talking more about post 1965 Hart-Celler Act. And a lot of those people didn't come from Europe. They came from like the third world. I mean, that's what the act opened up, and that's why we're seeing so many problems with integration and immigration. Because
Yeah.
when you had the Ellis Island immigrants, they were from Europe, and so really, even though there was, there's still a little bit of problems with integration, like the Irish and Italian mob and what have you, they did become sort of ingrained in the cultural fabric of this country, because this country was still in many ways being founded, so to speak, right? We were still kind of settling the West. We were still kind of expanding to territories like Alaska, Hawaii, various nations that would later become states. And they became fundamentally integrated in the fabric of what it means to be an American. Uh, the Hart-Celler immigrants, or people who came after that point, it's a different story, because they don't come from Europe, right? They come from cultures that have the same views on sort of like the value of human life, certain cultural sort of expectations. When is it appropriate to do certain things? How are women to be treated? How like what constitutes being polite? What constitutes sort of your entire view of like a shame versus abuse culture, right? And all those elements have kind of turned a lot of these cities where the post Hart-Celler immigration families and immigrants have settled into sort of ethnic ghettos, right? Where
Yeah.
you have this kind of balkanization effect in the cities, where you've got the Mexican part of town, you've got the like I'm trying to think, Venezuelan part of town, you've got the Nigerian part of town, whatever it may be, right? Where they clearly see themselves as that ethnic group. They celebrate their native culture from where they're originally from. And it creates this level of ethnic hatred and conflict and tension that I don't think we need to have in this country. And I think if instead people in that position were able to go back to their original country and integrate and make it back into the original society they came from and make it better, maybe even with the skills that they've learned, we would see those native cultures become a lot better, right? But instead they're coming here and just nobody's happy. And we're almost existing in this like low scale kind of like race war, which is
Yeah.
horrible. I don't want that for anybody.
Well, right. And I need you to be completely honest. I know you're talking to someone who is, yes, also classified as a right winger, but we are on different branches of the right wing. So someone like me,
Mm.
I plan on leaving the United States one day. I plan on meeting my future wife somewhere in Latin America, preferably. Spanish is my second language. I am, Catholic light. She would also be Catholic light. I can tell you, Latino women are a lot easier to navigate than these white girls out here. A lot easier to navigate, right?
Mm.
A lot less of a pain in the ass. I would plan, obviously, by doing that on race mixing. I would plan on bringing her back to the United States. And a lot of men in the West are doing
Mm.
that too. Australian men are doing that with Thai and Asian women. European men are doing that with African and Middle Eastern women, going to third world nations, meeting their future wives there, bringing them back to the West. Because it's so much easier to deal with women from those cultures than from the West. Do you see someone like me and what I plan to do? Do you see me as your enemy? Do you see me as detrimental to Connor's America? And please be honest.
So I wouldn't see you as an enemy, but I would encourage you to try to marry within our race. And the reason why is I don't say that as someone who doesn't find women of other races attractive. I think there's this common premonition or this common idea that if you're advocating for white identitarianism, you must like think that women of other races are, oh, they're not attractive, they're not pretty, I've never felt attraction to them. That's completely untrue. I've been in relationships with non-white women before. I've dated non-white women before, but I think similar to what Nick said a long time ago, there's a sense of duty, right, in marrying within our own race. There's a sense of duty and kind of taking up this mantle, so to speak, of continuing on our legacy and our heritage. And it's not because women of other races aren't good women. It's not because I view other races as inferior or what have you. I think that everyone is made in the dignity and image of God, and we all have equal dignity. But it's more that if we want to have a white race, we have to have white children. And the only way that we have white children is if we get married to other white people. And so I think by and large, while, you might have some examples of people that marry outside of our race, and certainly in, I think, minor examples that doesn't do harm, what we're seeing is this promotion of large scale race mixing specifically towards white people that is genocidal, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to snuff out our race. And so that's why you have ads on TV all the time advocating for race mixing, advocating for white people marrying outside their race, whether it's a man being with a non-white woman or a non-white man being with a white woman, as a means of decentivizing white people to continue our race. And so I think that if in a couple minor examples race mixing happens, that's not going to be detrimental to the white race. But I think we are in such a position right now and in such a precarious position that a lot of us do need to take up white wives, and we do need to consider marrying a white woman.
So, all right, I can see a flight maybe to Poland or Hungary maybe in your future there, because I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to look at how you can make this work, and it's not the white men. You've got great ideology, right? I mean, but I don't see the white women wanting to do their part. I would say white women are the right hand of the white genocide. Genuinely. I'm being honest about that. And they're the ones that most often initiate breakups. They're the ones that most often initiate divorces. They're the ones that most often will ruin a man's life and throw a shitload of alimony at him and fuck his future up completely, right? I just don't know how that'll work. Whereas an Asian woman, a Muslim woman, a Spanish woman will just say, see, Poppy, cook, clean. That's the end of it. There's no headache, right? So, but then the only area of the world where I would say you can find that kind of culture with the women is Eastern Europe. That's it. I don't know where else it exists, man. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. At the same time, I mean, and by the way, I also have Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, so I don't even know if I would be fully classified as white anyways, if you guys would put me maybe in a subcategory. I've got Sicilian ancestry on my mom's Italian side, so again, I don't even know if I would be fully even considered European by, like, you guys' standards. But at the same time, when you have your own future to look out for, right, and you just want a committed, submissive wife that's going to stand by your side no matter what, and you see the way these white girls are, where else do you look? Besides Poland, besides Russia, besides Hungary, besides Romania. That's it. They're gone. There's no other place where you can find them.
It's tough because I think that, I've watched a couple videos on sort of the idea of going the passport route. Yeah. And I think for white women where they do live in countries that are stable, like Poland or Hungary, if you marry a woman from that society, I don't think she would want to integrate into the U.S. because she was trying to get anything out of you or exploit you. But I think sometimes when we're talking about like Filipino women or Colombian women or what have you, sadly with the white gentlemen that might go down there and try to marry those women, they might only see a green card. And then once they get here, it's kind of a different story. I've heard some horror stories of people like going to those places and thinking they found their, like, for lack of a better term, their trad wife or whatever amongst these women. And then it's like only to come back and find out it's like she's basically a gold digger, like the Kanye song goes, right? So I would say while it's difficult, I wouldn't lose hope. I think that the other thing is too, we have to not take a retreatist mentality, right? Because it's very easy to retreat and say, oh, well, all these women are cooked. It sucks. It's horrible. It doesn't work out here or what have you. And I mean, even just an anecdotal experience, I think it's actually a lot better than people even make it out to be. I mean, I was hearing about a family friend recently who like went down to South Carolina, and the girl to boy ratio down there is like 3 to 1. Like there's a ton of women, and there's like very little guys to kind of like go around and date and marry them or what have you. And so I wouldn't throw in the towel so easy. I know that's easier said than done,
Right.
but I think we have to kind of contemplate these higher things. And sometimes while we do have a personal future to look out for, part of those higher things do involve our personal future, if that makes sense.
Right. What would be in Connor's America? So imagine, you one day you're president of the United States, and Nick Fuentes, he's your vice president, and you've got Sarah Stock is Secretary of State, and Richie, the big muscular guy, he's the Secretary of Defense, and blah blah blah. So you all managed to get into the White House. What country would you want to model the United States after today in 2025? What would be a good example?
That's a very good question. I think I wouldn't even be a vice president. Nick would be the guy you'd want to be your president. I'm just a Catholic apologist, but regardless, the question, that's a great question. What I would say is that if we look at a lot of these sort of post-liberal countries, we look at these countries like the Visegrad countries, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic. We look at even, I wouldn't say Russia in terms of culture, but some of the elements of their government, there's some admiration for how they kind of run things or how their executive branch is a little bit stronger. And especially like El Salvador, right? A country like that with what Bukele is doing in regards to sort of exercising a stronger presidency, I think that's what we need to look for. I don't think we should completely maybe dispense with the political arrangement that we have, so to speak, not in terms of how our politics is currently running. That should be dispensed with, but we don't have to there's some people that think that I would advocate for something like a monarchy or what have you. And it's like, where are we going to get a king from? Where are we going to get an aristocratic class from? Like that's pie in the sky, completely ridiculous, completely out of touch with the culture, the history, everything that this land has. However, with the rise of Donald Trump, with the sort of focus that the right has had on having a stronger leader and having someone who is more willing to call the hard shots, willing to sit down and make difficult decisions, we're definitely in need of a stronger presidential figure. And not just from a moral standpoint, but even from the powers that are afforded to him. And so what I would look for is kind of maybe potentially even the Constitution to kind of be amended in such a way that it grants the executive branch much more power in order that you don't have like justices blocking what the president is trying to do, or you don't have a legislative branch that gets in the way of really sort of what this figure of the people, this kind of champion of our people and our culture and our nation is trying to achieve. And I think that's what we've seen with Trump, because Trump has sucked. He's done a bad job in terms of like kind of carrying out his campaign promises. But to be fair, even in his first presidency, a lot of the stuff he wanted to do was just blocked, right? I mean, he wanted to pull out of Afghanistan much earlier. And even like, the generals of our United States military were just telling him, we're not going to do that. And we're not going to listen to you. So if we're going to drain the swamp, I think we do need sort of a more Caesar type figure, as like Oswald Spengler would mention, like a kind of strong man, a man of the people, a kind of against time, who is trying to save his nation to arise. And I think that's what we had looked for in Trump. And sadly, he was not that kind of man.
Right. Is there anyone that comes to mind that you think would be that kind of guy? And by the way, you mentioned El Salvador. That's interesting. I could see Poland. I could see Hungary. Although they do have a female lead. I don't know how you guys would feel about that. I personally think men make better leaders.
Definitely no women presidents.
Right. No, I would agree with that too. But Italy, though, Italy has Giorgia Meloni. I was just wondering, you guys would probably at least be a fan of hers, since she has a lot of the same views as you guys.
Sadly, no, actually. I mean,
Really?
Meloni and even I'm trying to think of what her name is, of the French National Rally Party.
Le Pen.
Do you know who I'm speaking of?
Yeah, Marine Le
Le
Pen.
Pen.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marine Le Pen. When women get into politics, they almost always water down what their party actually believes is, if it's a right-wing party. And we've seen that with both of these women. I mean, Giorgia Meloni, sadly, she let in a ton of migrants into Italy and completely cucked out on that.
She did?
She has kind of gone back on her. Yeah, she has,
I didn't know
sadly.
that. I thought she was being like, she was like, no hijabs, no mosques. She was, because I know Italy has a lot of Ethiopian Muslim immigrants. She was like, nope, fuck you guys, you're going back. A lot of Libyans. I thought she was rounding them all up and sending them back. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, women in politics, women always drop the ball. I've never seen a good female president or a good. The only time I've ever seen a good female leader, so to speak, is like in a monarchic setting. Like if we look back in history, like Queen Isabella or what have you. But it's like, again, that was still a very like patriarchal society, and she still had like male advisors that were kind of like leading the charge, so to speak, right? In this sort of like girl boss republic type structure that we live under, that just never happens. And so women almost always drop the ball.
Right. Well, and also, by the way, I'm glad you mentioned Afghanistan, and I'm about to mention Hillary Clinton. I thought, her once again bending the knee to Israel, right? Her and Obama taking out Gaddafi. Libya is now worse, by the way. They now have slavery there ever since Gaddafi was ousted.
They do.
So, I mean, the closest, I would say she would be the closest example we've ever had to a woman president would be Hillary Clinton. Kamala Harris, really, I mean, what was she, a senator for like 2 days? And then the only reason why she made it to VP was because Biden picked her. Like, let's just be honest about that. She Tulsi Gabbard called her out in a debate in 2020, and then she had to like bitch out. She didn't even make it to Iowa. So I wouldn't say Kamala Harris would be the closest thing we've ever had to a female president. I would say it would be Hillary Clinton. And she literally is just a complete neocon. Like, the one example I have of a female president in the United States is everything I hate, right? Destabilize the whole Middle East on Israel's behalf. Do this, do that, blah, 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 right? I can't name really one thing she's ever done for America. Now, ironically, though, the other thing that I want to talk to you about, because you didn't get to run up for Mehdi Hassan's piece about Israel and Gaza, right? And we spoke about your religious ideology. We've spoken about your racial ideology. This is now about foreign policy. I take it you're a huge America First guy, right? You're a huge America First guy.
Absolutely.
You would be disgusted whether it's Israel or whether it's Ukraine and Russia. Right. I mean, any country controlling our country and showing us that we don't live in a sovereign nation would be disgusting to you. It's disgusting to me. Even if I were to find some rad lib, with 18 COVID vaccines who waves, the tranny flag on the back seat of their car, it would be disgusting to them. I think as Americans universally, we should be absolutely disgusted by this. Israel's control of the U.S. is very troubling to me. We've seen it from both Republicans and Democrats, the whole establishment. It was the reason for Iraq. It was the reason for our intervention in Syria, in Libya, us overthrowing Egypt. They had a president, I think, Morsi, who was part of the Muslim Brotherhood. We overthrew him. They've bombed Qatar. We've intervened now in Yemen and Somalia on their behalf. Israel's involved in a 7-front war. The thought of that makes me nauseous. That makes me physically ill. I want to throw up when I hear that. Of course, you have the genocide in Gaza. They're now considering striking Iran again. And at least you could say from Zelensky and from Netanyahu, at least Zelensky did go to Congress and he said, hey, America, I appreciate the weapons. If you want to send troops, we appreciate it, but it's not necessary. Ukrainian troops can operate this weaponry just fine without you guys. Netanyahu shows up. He's like, hey, stupid American, go enlist in your military. Go die for my country. Go die in Iraq. Go die in Iran. Go die in Afghanistan. Go die in Qatar. You stupid American. Go die in Yemen. Go die in Libya. For me, right? I I'm going to bomb Iran again and I want you guys there. I said do war. Now go do war, stupid American. I don't know why, for once, no U.S. president can just say to Israel's prime minister, fuck off. You're not in charge of us. You guys start all these wars. You're going to figure the shit out yourself. And by the way, you might not want them living here, I understand, but to ease some of the terrorism and some of the tension that the Muslim world feels towards us, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. We got a shitload of aid coming in for the people in Gaza, all right? And we're going to straighten up the Middle East. You guys attack any one of our Muslim allies there now, we're going to fuck you up, and Tel Aviv is going to be underground, motherfucker, all right? That's what I would do, honestly, if I was president. And let's just talk about this ally and the way they behave. They had prior knowledge that 9/11 was going to go down. Didn't tell us. We're even celebrating the 5 dancing Israelis. You probably know all about that. We're celebrating outside of the Twin Towers as they were hit. I'd love to see mainstream media talk about that for 2 seconds. 100 American troops died in Lebanon from I think it was the group that was the precursor to Hezbollah, right? And Israel knew about it and they let it happen. This is not a friend. This is not an ally. If I had a friend that extracted money from me like that and abused me like that, I'd say, fuck you. You're not my friend. Get out of here, right? I don't know how this country of 90, the size of my pinky finger, manages to have this hold on us, this massive country of 350 million people, as big and as mighty as we are. I don't know if it's Epstein blackmail. Where do you stand on all that? Because, I was upset we didn't get to hear your perspective on that. And I was at the edge of my seat. I was like, man, I wonder what Connor's going to say,
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I would agree with a lot of the sentiments that you have. I think I would really like to see us not be involved in many of the conflicts that we are involved in the world stage, because they serve primarily an interest of, really, they serve Jewish interests first.
Yep.
And they serve sort of like a neoliberal, kind of Wilsonian, like every country has to be a democracy kind of ideology that I think has more than not only failed, but should have never been sought out in the first place, right? And we shouldn't have in that way our finger in every pie, right? We shouldn't have our finger in every pie. I think that there are certainly allies that we have. I'm okay sometimes with sending aid to certain countries if they need it or if they are really a cultural ally. But I think we need to be way more discerning, and the overreach that we currently have is way too much, right? We've got problems here and we're not tackling the problems here. And instead we're sending billions of dollars to aid a country that most of their population thinks that we're cattle because we're not Jewish, right? Yeah. And so if we're looking at a nation like that, right, that's not someone who's even remotely an ally. They're not remotely a friend. They're if anything, an enemy, right? And I would say that for Israel, I would like to just see like kind of throw them the wolf, so to speak. I don't really care if they fall, right? I think that they are a nation that has done everything to kill innocent lives, take the lives of Christians, destabilize white countries, and I wouldn't say that I want to actively attack them by any means. That's not my hope. And, if there's a world where Israel can exist and just leave us the hell alone, I'm perfectly fine with that. I would even be in favor of like a 2-state solution if that achieved the sort of safety and peace of the Middle East. But I think that Jewish supremacy is such an ideology that it doesn't allow for peace, right? Yeah. They always want war. They want the greater Israel project, and they're not happy with just kind of existing as a country. They have to be on top all the time. And so I think what we really need in terms of our approach to Israel is a very hard and a very fast cut off of all supply, all aid. And we just say, you guys fight your own wars. If you want to start crap in the Middle East and you lose that war, that's on you. Right. Right. That's what I would like to see, because I don't really see Hamas as like my enemy. I don't see them as, actively attacking Americans or going after America. I'm sure that they do horrible things and I condemn those horrible things, but it's like, Hamas didn't call me cattle. Israelis did, right? Hamas isn't trying to actively kill my race and oppress the Catholic Church. It's like Israel is, right? And so my foreign policy in regards to Israel would just be, you're on your own. You know, if you're going to start these wars, you fight them on your own,
Right.
and we'll see how long you last. I guarantee they would lose without our aid.
Oh, without our aid, definitely. I mean, I think the only question I would have is how long would it take? But I mean, that would get them probably to agree
Right.
at least to a two-state solution, or at least a one-state solution, where just the Palestinian Christians and Muslims and the Israeli Jews just live as equals in that land. Again, I wouldn't care one way or the other.
Right.
I do think it's ironic that, again, I don't personally, I'm not striving for a white ethno state. I do think it's interesting though, whenever, some folks like yourself or when people, adjacent to you talk about wanting a white Catholic ethno state, you guys are the bad guys. Yet Israeli Jews can talk all day long about how they want to maintain their Jewish ethno state. And even Democrats in America go, yep, that's fine with me. Fine with me. Yep. Yep, every ethnic group is entitled to their own place. Oh, you're a white Catholic? You want to have an ethno state? Nazi, bad guy. So, that's been the biggest problem
Right.
I've had. And then, of course, when you said they're trying to destroy white civilizations, are you talking about how when the Middle East is destabilized, you have a lot of these Arab Muslim migrants that then trek to the West and flood it? Is that what you mean? Or is it the siphoning off of resources? Is it the 10,000 American troops that died in Iraq on their behalf? Is it all those examples?
It's sort of both. So, and just to clarify, it's like I don't even want an ethno state. I just want a white supermajority in America, like it's always been.
Right.
So I guess in that way, like the Jewish ethno state would be a much more bigoted project than anything I want. It's like I just want this country to look like how it's always existed, right?
Right.
But regardless, left-wing Jews and right-wing Jews, people always make this distinction, or they say, oh, the problem is it's the religious Jews or it's the secular Jews, right? If Jews turned to their own religion, they'd be more peaceful. Or if Jews turned away from their religion, they would be more kind to other ethnic groups or what have you, right? This is a sort of false dichotomy, right? Or really a false choice. Jews serve Jews at the end of the day, and it's because they're all formed in the religion of the Talmud, either directly if they're religious or sort of through cultural influence if they're secular. If they're secular Jews, yes, I don't expect that they're studying the text of the Talmud or what have you, but their grandparents, their ancestors were formed by this ideology that says you are better than everyone else.
Yeah.
You are set apart. You are a special people. You can do whatever you want. Your morality is whatever benefits this people. And if you have to step on other people to get it, then so be it, right? And because of that, left-wing Jews in white countries advocate for immigration overwhelmingly. They advocate for mass migration. They try to create policies that create it. And anytime we oppose it, they really sort of compare our opposition to, again, like the Holocaust or whatever, which they bring up constantly. And then right-wing Jews, so to speak, kind of your IDF soldiers, your, sort of like religious supremacists in the Neset, your sort of Ben Gavirs of the world, Shabbat, whatever you want to call them. They are the ones who destabilize these countries that then bring out the immigrants and refugees that then left-wing Jews want to invite into our countries, right?
Bingo.
So it's kind of a two-tiered system. It's like, even if they might bicker amongst each other, they still show up for Team Jew at the end of the day. And that's the only team they're batting for. Whether it's them being in our country and saying we need to let more immigrants in, or them being in Israel and saying we need to destabilize all these other countries so it creates a problem and a crisis, right? Not to mention, it's like, if you want to blame, like, we talked about like white women earlier. Who do you think has sold the culture to these white women and to even white men that has created the sort of degeneracy we see in the West? It's Jews.
Yeah.
It's always a Jewish name. I mean, I think his name is last name's Goldstein. I think it's David Goldstein or not David Goldstein. It'll come back to me. But there was this famous pornographer, something Goldstein, that he was instrumental in sort of pioneering hardcore pornography within America, right? And he said in one of his famous interviews in Screw magazine, which was one of the earliest like hardcore porn magazines, how his motivation for creating and pioneering sort of this hardcore pornography in America was in order to destabilize specifically white Catholic Christian society at large, right? And he said how much Jews hated it, and that's why Jews were involved in pornography, right? And so every single destabilizing cultural influence we see in the West, even though a lot of white people are complicit in that or may even participate in that, there's always a Jewish last name behind all of it. And so we really have to ask, why do they want to live in our societies, right? They're not willing to integrate themselves. They do everything to kind of throw them off. And I'm not even advocating for taking anyone's rights away or anything like that. That's not what I want to do. But what I want to do is I do want to bar these people from power. I don't think that Jews should have power over white people and Christians, right? I think that's okay to say.
I think it's okay to say too. And
I think that their rights should be.
Oh, my bad. No, and
right.
On top of that,
no, absolutely. You totally get it.
So Rahm Emanuel.
Oh, what'd you say?
Rahm Emanuel was actually Obama's chief of staff, and he served in the IDF. I'm sorry, if you ever had an allegiance to a foreign military, and on top of that, if you're a dual American-Israeli citizen, in America, you should be... Look, if you're a private citizen, I don't know what much we could do about that. But as the voters, we should not allow that person. We shouldn't allow them to be a DA. We shouldn't allow them to be in law enforcement. We shouldn't allow them to be a congressman, a senator, a president. Fuck no, right? Absolutely not if you have dual loyalty. And I also want to make it clear, when Israel was being established, there was someone who was serving. He briefly served as the Secretary of State of India. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. His name was Sir Edwin Montagu. He was the only Jewish person in England's entire government at the time. And he said, don't create a Jewish ethno-state. I am not an Israeli. I am a Brit. Yes, I might pray to a different God, but at the end of the day, my nationality is British. You know, I mentioned my grandpa had 2 Orthodox Jewish parents. I want to make it clear, I'm not Jewish. I'm not an AIPAC representative. I'm not saying the U.S. should go to war on behalf of Israel. I just happen to have, if you see my my Ancestry.com test, I just happen to have about, I think, 20% Ashkenazi Jewish DNA. That's it. So... I'm a good guy. I'm on your side. You know, hands up, man. But at the end of the day, you know, it's just like we let these people just completely run the U.S. government and boss us around. And on top of that, you know, my grandfather, like I said, he was raised Jewish. And then when he married my grandma, they started mixing their Jewish and Christian traditions. So my dad, aunt, and uncle, they'd open 8 Christmas presents under the tree, and they'd light a menorah right next to the tree. You know? They mix their practices, so to speak. And the first thing that even they would say is, why does our country have to do all this on Israel's behalf? Right? We're American Jews and Christians. Our allegiance is to this country. My uncle's a federal agent. My dad's an attorney. He serves Americans. You know, he fights to make life better in this country, not another country. So the whole establishment of Israel in and of itself, I mean, you basically created the whole dual loyalty, and for some people it's real. I'm sorry, for Ben Shapiro, it's fucking real. That's not a trope. It's not an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. No, Ben Shapiro genuinely has more loyalty to Israel. Barry Weiss, oh my God, Larry Ellison, like, did you see what he's doing on TikTok now? I have to look up what these people's nationalities are. I'm like, you're an American? Are you sure? Because you're talking about how the greatest honor of your life is to represent the well-being of the Israeli military, of the Israeli Knesset. What about the American military? What about the American government, as much as they have their problems? I have to look up what these people's nationality even is. And that's what's the most shocking thing to me. But, yeah, I mean, it's just... I don't know when this is ever going to get straightened out, but the whole establishment of it, literally of this country, it created the whole dual loyalty trope. The dual loyalty trope wouldn't exist if Israel was never created in the first place. You did have the Holocaust. I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, I definitely agree there was some miscounting with the numbers. There's no way that 6 million people did die. I do have Polish and Jewish relatives that I know were killed in some of the camps, but I still even don't believe that 6 million people did die. And then when you look at, like, oh yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, ran a company publishing history textbooks. It's like, oh, maybe that's why we feel the way, what we know about the Holocaust is what we know. Maybe that's why we've never heard about the Nakba. Maybe that's why we don't know shit about the Greater Israel Project. You know what I'm saying? And on top of that, the guy steals nuclear secrets and waves it around in front of everyone. So yeah, this country has got us by the balls, man. What would you say would be, I mean, obviously not Israel. What would you say, though, would be another country? You mentioned countries you would want the United States to give aid to. What would you mention? What would you consider a cultural ally in that respect? What would be an example of that?
I mean, I would really say that in many ways, I would love the United States to be more forceful with countries in the West that are oppressing their native population. So like the UK, for instance, I think that we should exert political pressure on them to reverse their demographic change and try to incentivize them to adopt again, more pro-Christian, pro-white policies, not throwing a grandma in jail because she has a problem with the roaming migrant gangs that are literally like raping people as, they make their way around the town, right? I would say that those countries we need to put in a diplomatic situation where it makes it very hard for them to oppress their own population. And I think countries that are doing very well, culturally speaking, again, like the Visegrad countries, Poland, Hungary, I would even say really kind of Italy is doing pretty well culturally, despite having some misgivings about Meloni's policies or what have you. Those are countries that we need to integrate ourselves with, and we need to do a better job of kind of supporting that cultural change through a diplomatic mission. Whether that's giving aid to their political parties that want to advocate for sort of the reversal of these harmful policies, or even just, being more willing to play hardball when, a political outcome in one of these societies is negative towards their native population. I think essentially what we need to do is we need to build up countries that want to build up the West, and countries that want to knock it down. We need to not be hard on their people, but be hard on their governments, right? And if we're hard on their governments, hopefully what it'll do is it will kind of integrate this greater responsibility that America should have for the West as a whole. And I think reclaiming really sort of the Western world, because, one of the things I become particularly passionate about is I think that America is not a melting pot. America is rather a beautiful cultural tapestry of all these European cultures that have come here and define the way of living that we so enjoy, right? Whether if you go up to sort of the Minnesota and the Northeast, right, or the North Midwest of America, you see a predominance of Norwegian cultures or Swedish cultures. You come to somewhere like Colorado, you see a lot of German culture. You go back east, it's a lot of English culture, right? This petri dish of different cultures, I think, is the key to success to unlocking sort of what we've long forgotten in the West as a whole of our own identity and who we are. And I hope that we can use that lasting legacy to create something better for ourselves and our children. And I think that that should kind of undergird our diplomatic policy is what country is aiding us in that mission? What country is aiding us in trying to make the Western world a better place for our sort of future descendants, and what countries are not doing that, if that makes sense?
Future NATO alliance with those Visegrad, with those the Visegrad countries, as you said, right? Would you do that if you were in power?
Honestly, that might be a good idea. To be honest, while I'm not very well versed in international policy or international politics as well as I should be, I think something like that would be very beneficial, right? Just this idea of taking responsibility for helping the West heal. I think if we do that, that will be special. And if that means becoming more integrated with those countries, then I think that's something that we need to accomplish.
Now, here's the thing, though, and this is going to get into something, another war. I'm really interested to hear where you stand on that. These are countries that are enemies with Russia. You've said earlier you can appreciate the way Russia's government is ran, but you disagree with them culturally. Is it because they're not necessarily, like, if you look at Russians, if you look at their DNA, they are not, first off, they're not Catholic, they're Orthodox Christians, or they're atheists, but they're culturally Orthodox or something, so they're not really, like, I think Putin goes to an Orthodox church maybe like once a year for holidays, and he's not really about the religion and his personal life too much. And if you look at their DNA, Russians, they actually have a good amount of Middle Eastern DNA. They have a good amount of Jewish DNA. They have a good amount of East Asian DNA from the Mongols that had conquered them earlier. Is that one of the reasons why? So where would you stand on if you were in power, right, forming a NATO alliance with those countries that you talked about that you'd like the U.S. and West in general to be modeled after, they get in a conflict with Russia. How would you feel about Russia? And on top of that, what do you think the U.S. should do regarding Russia and Ukraine right now? And also, do you think Ukraine has similar values to the country you would want to build as well?
So what I would say is that the problem with Russia for me is not I would say a lot of their population is white. It's not a sentiment that I think that they're not white. It's more so the fact that Dugin is someone who defines a lot of their sort of like future planning and their sort of future approach to politics. And the thought that he represents is called Eurasianism, or I think that's the exact term, Eurasianism, or the fourth political theory, where he kind of essentially has this like negative view actually towards race. He in fact does have this view that is kind of an enemy of identitarianism, and that people can just be replaced and people are numbers. And what's up?
Alexander Dugin.
Yes, Alexander Dugin. Yes. He is somebody who does not care about the same things we do. And so considering he's kind of governing a lot of or not governing, but sort of writing a lot of the policy and identifying sort of the future outlook of Russia, I don't think that this is someone that we want to be in bed with, right? And I don't see him in any metric as being an ally. I think he's completely self-interested. I think he just wants to create these sorts of, I mean, he wants to create what I called like Mexico with snow, like frozen Mexico, right? Where it's this kind of like second world country that is just hell bent on having like a very large population. So they're like politically advantageous from like a military standpoint, but with no sort of like qualms about like, are you preserving the native Russian population? Are you doing a disservice to sort of, really Europe as a whole? Do you care about preserving Europe or what have you? And clearly they don't, right? They represent a different worldview. They represent sort of a different kind of cultural legacy in that way. And I think due to that fact, we can't really look to them as some ally or bastion of conservatism. It's just a dead ringer, right? Yes, they have some more conservative policies. They're also one of the countries in Europe that has the highest rate of abortion still, and I'm pretty sure they do have legal abortion. And they're really not a bastion of saving the West, right? And I think a lot of right wingers have kind of again like taken up this mantle, thinking that they're going to get something out of like collaborating with Russia, and instead I think they're just going to get stabbed in the back, as we've already seen, right? Many people have moved there because they're like, oh, I want to be in Russia to escape woke ideology, and the dad gets like sent to the front lines immediately, right? And they get completely just shafted by this culture that is corrupt, that isn't really conservative, and doesn't really have even a whole lot of regard for the value of human life, right? And I think that's Dugin. Dugin doesn't really care about human life. He just wants Asiatic like Mongol hordes to kind of conquer the world, and that's not something I'm about.
Yeah.
And I say Asiatic Mongol hordes not because being Mongolian is bad, or being Asian is bad, but Russia's been like this for a long time, where they just want to like throw bodies at a front line to conquer the whole world, so to speak, or be sort of this powerful superpower without any regard for the nations that they're destroying, right? Ukraine, on the other hand, is a neoliberal hellhole, and it's completely Jewish. It's
It is?
run by Jews. I mean, Russia is kind of run by, right?
Wait,
What did you say?
Ukraine is run by Jews? I thought it was just Zelensky who was Jewish. I thought they have a
Yeah, it is.
Orthodox Christian majority. Unless you mean they're run by Jews like the U.S. is.
No. Oh, well, yeah, more like that. I mean,
Okay.
yes, the majority of the population is not Jewish, but their government cabinet and everything, it's completely Jewish controlled. And they basically represent this sort of like neoliberal project that the West is trying to do in Ukraine, right? They're not like a traditional Slavic country by any metric. I'm sure many of their people are, and I feel deeply for the people that are being affected by the war. But we would be kidding ourselves if they're also some bastion of like saving Europa, right? Saving Europe. I think really with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it's like any way you shake it, a Ukrainian victory wouldn't really be ideal, but neither would like a Russian victory. It's just kind of a messed up situation.
Yeah.
And I think that if anything, if there was some way to just kind of return the borders to how they were before, that would be the most ideal.
Right. Well, and then you also have to look at Russian nationalism. So, and this isn't anything
Right.
at all based off of a racial ideology. If you do actually look at some Ukrainian nationalism, you might say that they are ran by a Jewish government. You have, of course, you have Zelensky. You have their, I think, oh God, what was his name? Denis Schmeigel, I think his name was. Their Secretary of State or their prime minister, he was Jewish as well. I think they do have a nearly entirely Jewish cabinet right now. But in a lot of the militias and armed forces that are fighting the Russians on the front lines right now in Ukraine, a lot of them are actually neo-Nazis. They are white nationalists. So it's made for this really interesting combo where they've got this Jewish government and then they've got these white supremacists, these, I mean, you put it like this, saving Europa. A lot of them do have, Iron Cross tattoos. They do have, I think, written in Ukrainian. I saw one soldier had a save, the white race, save Europa tattoos, tattooed on his arms. So they do have a lot of that ideology in their military. That's clearly evident. I don't know if the Russians really have that so much. I think the Russians, like you said, they just have this ideology of, well, all right, whether you're a white Slavic Russian, whether you're an East Asian, Eskimo Slavic Russian, whether you're a Middle Eastern Russian, more from Georgia or Armenia, whether you're a Jewish Russian. All right, cool. We're all Russians. Let's just all throw in together. But it's the nationalism, because they look at Ukraine as actually a part of Russia, whereas the Ukrainians and the rest of Europe would go, whoa, no, it's not. No, it's not. We're actually, Ukraine, as you said, they clearly want to be more like France today. They want to be more like Germany today. They want to be more like Denmark, Netherlands, And I don't know if this is true or not. I've straight up even heard rumors that Zelensky might be a drug addict. Come on, that right there just screams.
I could see that.
Right. I heard he hides in bunkers for days at a time and just snorts heroin and cocaine. Again, we don't know if this is confirmed. This is a lot of this is just, theories and stuff like that. But people in your movement would just say, all right, return the borders to what it once was. Neither of these people are really all our friends. Who, when it comes to, Connor's America, right? As Mehdi Hassan so elegantly put it, when it comes to that, would someone, for example, like myself, who has some Sicilian or Jewish ancestry, would someone who might have even ancestry from Latin America or Asia or Africa, clearly is not genetically European 100%, but they share your views and they want what you want, would they be able to be included in your movement or not? And by the way, what would happen to people who aren't included in your movement? Like, would you advocate for maybe one America for everyone, but segregating people who have different movements? Like, for example, I told you I used to work up in Massachusetts. And for Pride Month back in 2024, I worked at a theater, right? I was part of the entertainment industry. And for Pride Month 2024, they literally had a whole mural on the wall of naked men engaging in sexual acts. There was a pride parade outside, these big moving stage platforms with men in dresses, men with dildos taped to their heads, men engaging in like not full on sexual acts, but light sexual acts in the eyes of children, in the eyes of elderly people, in the eyes of families, right? So, for example, in my eyes, I wouldn't want the LGBT community to be like shoved in a dungeon, to be shoved in a camp, to be completely isolated from mainstream civilization. But I would say, okay, if that's how you guys are going to represent your culture, you need to have your own separate block. We're going to carve out, if I was like an urban planner or a mayor, I would carve out 1 block radius for Pride Month. I'd say, here, you guys do that little thing in this area. We're going to have cops guarding it. No one else is going to be able to come in. You guys keep your 1 block. You're not allowed to leave that 1 block. That's everybody else's space, right? Would you want a system more like that set up for people with differing racial ideology? How would a day-to-day in Connor's America look? And who would qualify and who wouldn't?
So, I mean, what I would say is that, you know, kind of clarifying before. So I don't want an ethno state. I just really want the demographics of America to be traditionally how they were, which was majority white, but there were non-white groups here that were perfectly regarded as American. I would still regard those people as American as well. That's really all I want. And so, you know, I'm not someone who is like a one drop rule, a guy who it's like, oh, hey, if you have 20% this race or whatever, you're not really white. I think it's a little bit more. I don't think it's that down to the wire. I think it's more so the case of we can kind of evidently look at most people and see what race they are, right? Most people are not really like split down the middle, like 50% black and 50% white, or 50% Hispanic and 50% Asian, right? Like most people kind of are majority like one thing, right? And we would look at them and say, okay, you're white, or okay, you're black, or what have you, right? Like a person who's like 80% black and 20% white, that's a black person, right? That's not, that's, I wouldn't say that's a person who's white, right? And vice versa, right? I wouldn't say that someone who's like 80% white and maybe 20% Hispanic is not white, right? So for non-white people, I mean, you know, if I had a vision of what America would look like, I would say, you know, non-white people will, of course, and white people will live in harmony and be treated with the, you know, same rights and same equal dignity as ever before. You know, I just think that the people that shouldn't really be here are the people that kind of came after the Hart-Celler Act and represent a completely different mode of thinking and a different way of life that I just don't think's ever really going to integrate into the cultural fabric of America, if that makes sense. I do think that people should be able to freely associate. So if you do have pockets of like, there's an Italian part of town, right, where people, you know, who are of Italian descent just choose to kind of congregate more, or, you know, that's the Irish part of town, or that's the part of town where there's more African Americans or what have you, that's perfectly fine. I see nothing wrong with that. I think it's actually kind of hateful when, you know, we did have that in this country before, and then these city planners came in and they said, oh, well, you can't do that anymore. You need forced diversity. And it's like, I think that kind of destroys the beautiful flavor of American culture,
Right.
where, you know, when I went out to California, I was in, I think it was San Fernando, and I saw like kind of a Croatian part of town, right? And it was beautiful being in this place that was like kind of noticeably Croatian and had this kind of Croatian flavor. I mean, all Americans, right? All American people, but having that kind of cultural legacy. And so that's what I would say is we just need to be able to freely associate with, you know, our peoples, right? And thus create these beautiful communities that I think can live in peace and harmony. bluntly put, I don't think gay people have any place in society to be able to corrupt society and commit sin. I'm not I'm not for concentration camps or anything like that. That's not something I believe.
Same.
But I do think that public acts of sodomy. So if someone's going to be like publicly and notoriously gay, I do think you should be thrown in jail for that. I think that that is something that corrupts society. I think that is something that's offensive to God. And I don't think that people should feel comfortable expressing homosexual viewpoints or homosexual orientations. If somebody is just struggling with what I would call same-sex attraction, but they reject that struggle, or not reject that struggle, reject that attraction, and they say, I'm trying to live a good life and I don't want to commit sodomy, I don't want to do that, that's not a gay person. That's just someone who's struggling with temptation like we all do, right? Where, you know, maybe some of us struggle with temptation towards alcohol or struggle with temptation towards women or, you know, cigarettes or what have you. You could not name a number of different things. That person has nothing to fear because they're not gay, right? They're not living a homosexual lifestyle. But someone who is unrepentingly living a homosexual lifestyle, they should not feel comfortable in our society at all. They should know that that's not welcome and that's not something that they should feel comfortable doing.
You did mention, I think briefly, you mentioned, obviously, I think the recent African migrants, you would say would not fit. What about African Americans?
Oh, yes.
They've been here for hundreds of years. Of course, Native Americans.
Oh, yeah.
Well.
Those ethnic groups have as much claim to being American as I am. So there wouldn't really be any change. I would just say we should just all be able to freely associate in our own communities, in the sense of, if people want to like live in a neighborhood that's predominantly black or predominantly white, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well,
not like if you go into that neighborhood and you're not that ethnic group or that racial group, you should be mistreated. I don't believe that. But just like, I don't see any problem with, it's like, oh yeah, that's the part of town that's predominantly black or whatever. That's perfectly fine.
Right. Well, do you think though that some parts of black culture, I'm talking African American culture, do you think that that's also conducive, I mean, to anything on the right? You know, do you think that when it comes to making America better, do you think a lot of the things that black culture tends to promote is good for America? I personally don't find, you know, violent rap music and, you know...
Oh, of course.
Right. I mean, you know, gangs and gang violence and single motherhood. I don't think that that's a beneficial thing. And I even grew up in white communities and I hear these, you know, preppy white kids listening to rap music, and I listen to that, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? That's not even your culture. Your daddy's a lawyer and your mommy's a dentist. I don't even know why you're doing this, but I don't know. And then again, you could also say, well, hey, a lot of the rap music executives, a lot of them were Jewish too. So maybe it's not even black culture, right? Maybe it's the Zionists, you know, trying to destabilize now the black community too and push that degeneracy on them. I don't know. The fact of the matter is that is now their culture. And you mentioned them. They are an ethnic group that's been here for hundreds of years. How would you feel about that, even if they might have a culture that isn't conducive to a stable country?
So I think the only thing that's going to solve that is Christ. I think that's where we need the grace of God to come in and clean people's hearts, because there's no policy that you can use to change something like that. What you need is God. And you can only have God in his church, which is the Catholic Church, right? And so what I would promote at that point is trying to lead missions in order to make the native black population of America Catholic, so that they would be more inclined to reject those fixings of culture that are so conducive to the destruction of other people and their own destruction too, in order that they can build up really beautiful communities that they can be proud of and they can look at and say, this is something to love and cherish.
Right.
And they used to have that, but, you know, unfortunately, with the kind of prevailing cultural influences that were exerted on them, it fell apart.
Well, Lyndon B. Johnson in particular, I mean, he was the one that incentivized a lot of those.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, or I would look at, like, one of my greatest influences, Andrew Tate. You know, you might look at him and say, oh, he's not a man of Christ. He's a big, dumb brute. You know, he's got 12 baby mamas, right? We might disagree on that. and that's totally cool. For me, at least, I would say he's one of my biggest influences. He's a black man. He's an American black man, and I look at him as someone, who I really strive to be like. So, but I hear what you're saying, man. I guess that's it. That's all I got. But it was really interesting to hear, all the stuff I didn't get to hear you say on Jubilee because, you
Yeah.
didn't make it to the chair on time. But hey, you made it to this chair, so that's good, man.
I appreciate it, brother. Well, and thank you so much for having me on. This was pleasant. I think you asked a lot of great questions too. I mean, it's tough because I think that the internet sometimes makes it so that we have like a caricature or like a half picture or a part picture of who someone is.
Right.
But it's another thing to just sit down and have conversations like these. So I really appreciate you inviting me on, Nate. This was awesome.
Yeah, man. And Connor, just so you know, I've only got about 2,000 YouTube subscribers. I've got about, I think under 1,000 Instagram followers. I have like
Totally
10
fine.
X followers. So, I'm still building my platform, but, this is what it's all about, right? And
Oh, yeah.
you got two big temptations I'm fighting right now every day.
It's tough, man. It's vape and Red Bull. Those two things.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a tough thing to battle.
I am not a man of Christ. I am a raging caffeine and nicotine lunatic. So, ay.
But hey, but dude, you can always be a man of Christ, right? It's never too late.
No, that's right. And another thing is I've always had a problem with which religion to choose. Right? So of course, you commented I'm 20% Ashkenazi Jewish. You wouldn't see a problem with anyone like me. I'm not an AIPAC lobbyist. I'm not trying to pull the strings and get this country's soldiers to go die for Israel. I'm just another white American whose ancestors came here before the Hart-Celler Act of 1965, just like you, just like everybody else, right? So, but regarding my own heritage, I look at that and I think you kind of explained why you chose Catholicism over Protestantism. Catholicism is strict. Protestantism, especially evangelicalism, it's all about the rapture. It's all about mysticism. It's all about dispensationalism, things like that, right? So the switch that a lot of you guys in your base have made from Protestantism or evangelicalism to Catholicism makes sense, but I just don't know which religion would I choose. I've got Italian and Polish great-grandparents, came to the U.S. when they were babies from Poland and Italy. I've got now Jewish great-grandparents. I've got Quaker and Episcopalian great-grandparents. I just don't know with my roots which one I would pick. And I also look at a lot of the teachings of Islam, and I also think that Christianity and Islam can be way more compatible than the Zionist mainstream media would tell us that they could be. Right? Of course, the Zionists need Christians and Muslims to wipe each other out so beloved Israel can be safe. But I just don't know in my personal life which one I personally should choose. You get what I'm saying about that?
Of course. Let me ask you a question that will lead into a larger theme.
Yeah.
When you consider the question of truth, like you consider what is true versus what is false. Would you say that something like math, for instance, like there's one right answer, right? Like 2 + 2 = 4. Would you affirm that?
Yeah, 2 + 2 absolutely equals 4.
Absolutely. So if that is something prevailing in our universe, right? Like we make an observation like bacteria, right, might contaminate this apple and the bacteria will eat that apple away and it'll rot away, or 2 + 2 = 4, or the sun comes out and it shines its rays upon the earth so plants grow. All these objective things, all these truthful things that we look at and we say that is objectively true, irregardless of what someone thinks or irregardless of the opinion that someone might have. We then have to ask the question, why isn't religion the same way? Because if we're talking about these created things, or not created by us, but created as in they exist in our world, have sort of an objective quality to them. There's something where it doesn't matter how I feel about it as much as this is just what it is, right? Math goes a certain way, physics goes a certain way, science as a discipline goes a particular way and it has a particular measurable objective quality, well, then we have to ask that the spiritual life and spiritual things would too have that objective quality, because it is the spiritual things that brought those objective things like science, math, all these other elements into our universe and into fruition and existence in the first place, right? And so when we start from that sort of thought process, that there is objectivity in our universe that we can observe through science and math, we understand that religion has to follow the same track. And so with religion, we have to ask, what is true? It's not just how I feel about something. I can feel a lot of different ways about those things I stated earlier, but at the end of the day, I know what is true and what is false. If religion is the same way, we need to look at, what elements of religion can I measure and say, is this true? Is that true? Is the existence of God true? Are there multiple gods? And once I start going down that thought process, I see that the only religion on planet Earth that manages to check all the boxes, that manages to prove itself in a way that is concordant with reason, is solely the Catholic religion. I mean, Islam, for instance, as much as Islam might have some admirable qualities or some truths in Islam, right, truths within themselves, it largely emerged in the, I believe it was the 7th century, right? The 7th century. Muhammad was largely illiterate, and he had an historian monk write a lot of the Quran and what have you. And if we even look at it from a historical standpoint, we say, okay, this is likely not the true religion. This is not the religion that God started, right?
Right.
Then we look at Judaism and we say, well, Judaism in the post-Second Temple era, it's like they don't have a temple to give sacrifices for anymore. So like a whole element of their religion is just gone. So Judaism is clearly false.
Yeah.
But we know that, if we observe things like, for instance, the Big Bang, we know there's a single cause to our universe. There's a single mover that causes everything. Well, if there's a single mover, that doesn't make sense that there would be multiple movers or multiple gods, right?
Yeah.
So that rules out Hinduism, that rules out like Norse mythology, Greek gods, all those pagan religions, right? So then suddenly we ask, okay, so we know that there's like one God, and that God would found a religion that would be historically grounded. Well, what is that historically grounded religion? Catholicism can go back to Christ himself, right? We look at the apostles being ordained by Christ to be bishops that would found a church, spread the gospel throughout the world, and ordain other men to be bishops and priests to offer the holy sacrifice, the Mass, so that we could be reconciled with God. And the fact that Catholicism is spread all over the world, it has this this quality of, supporting the monotheism of God, the sort of objective qualities of human life. Where are we going? What are we living for? And enunciating in such a beautiful way. We could get on this topic forever, but I would say just by even looking at those cursory kind of elements of truth, we can say that's very, very compelling. That's very compelling to say, look at all this objective fruit, look at all this kind of just even simple measurement of comparative religion. And we see that I think really only the Catholic religion can have that claim to truth from that, similar to science and math.
Okay. Would Catholics such as yourself, do you guys also believe in evolution?
So what I would say is that you can believe in evolution, but there's certain things that you can't believe in within that. Like you can't believe in what's called polygenism, like the idea that like Adam and Eve were not real historical people and that we had like multiple ancestors. But it is permissible in the church within that scope of a document called Humani Generis to believe in evolution.
Okay. Hey, fair enough, man. I
personally don't, but that's okay. That's a subject that there can be a fair level of disagreement on.
I went through my angry atheist phase all throughout as a teenager. I went through my Antifa radlib lunatic phase. I would say literally from about 2012 to about 2020 Really, I would say I got red-pilled and I became more right-wing when COVID happened. But then, of course, you look at someone like you look at someone like me, you look at someone like, I don't know, your average establishment Republican like Ted Cruz, for example. It's like, what do you mean by right-wing? But that's when I started to make that path. And then just recently, I felt very empty in my life. And I was an atheist, I'd say, as a hardline, strict atheist up until about 2023, 2024. Until recently, I felt very alone in my life. And I started to wonder, of course, what is leading, this loneliness epidemic? And a lot of it has been the turn away from religion of any sort. I don't just believe that it can be Catholicism, right? For some people, if it's Islam, cool. If it's Judaism, cool. If it's Protestantism, cool. But definitely the turn away from religion, we often think it's going to lead to this more scientifically advanced, civilization. If anything, it's created more of a dystopian moonscape, like The Handmaid's Tale or something like that. So
it's true.
Yeah. And
well,
by the way,
it's so funny. I don't know if he was. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. By the way, there was something interesting I didn't ask you. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. The pastor, Doug Wilson. He's Pete Hegseth's pastor. They call him the MAGA pastor. Yeah, and he is striving right now. He's like a reformed evangelical. He's not a Zionist though, so he's not like, for example, he's not like a Lindsey Graham or anyone like that, or a John McCain or a George Bush. Those people make me want to fucking vomit. But yeah, go die for Israel.
Honestly, fair, brother, fair.
They're another. I mean, dude, you want to unite the left and the right nowadays? You just say Zionism, Israel, evangelical Zionist Christians. Boom, there you go. We hate them all. Like, oh my God, the whole war on terror, it makes me fucking sick. And the wars in the Middle East, I'm so sick of it. It just makes me want to throw up. Every time I see Netanyahu's face, I just want to puke till I die of dehydration. It's disgusting, right? So, and the regard that he has for people in this country, just seeing most of it, even myself with Jewish blood, he would still look at me as goyim. I mean, they would still fucking eat me up.
Oh yeah.
But man, this Doug Wilson guy though, he's not a Zionist or anything like that. So because he's a reformed evangelical, he does not believe in dispensationalism or the rapture or any of the supernatural events. So the thing that I was curious, he wants a national and then a global Christian theocracy. And by the way, and like I said, he's not Catholic, he's Protestant. Would you see someone like him as an ally for your movement or no?
So I would see Doug Wilson as an ally in the short term. Like if we were standing side by side opposing abortion or homosexuality together, absolutely, I would see him as an ally there. I think in like a grand scale, like what do we want to do in the totality of time and like just kind of like 1,000 feet above the air, like we're looking at all the chess pieces out on the board. I would say that we have ultimately different goals at a grand scale, but in the short term, I would definitely see him as kind of an ally of sorts.
Cool. Because sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So, and I would say,
right,
guys like him on the right, guys like you on the right, guys like me on the right, we all have big enough enemies right now. So fuck it. Even though, like you said, 1,000 feet in the air, we may start to differ a little bit, but we've got big enough enemies we got to take care of right now. So I couldn't agree with that. I literally could not agree with that even more. What would you say though? I mean, fighting like Israel's influence in our country, fighting AIPAC's influence, fighting corrupt Jewish influence. Would you ally with any Muslim activists? Would you ally with any like pro-Palestine Islamic activists?
It would really depend. I think if it was like down to the wire, like let's say Congress tried to pass like a bill on anti-Semitism, that would like restrict free speech and basically like throw us in jail for speaking out against their influence. If it was something like that, then I mean, that's such a disparate state where it's like, yeah, we just all got to fight it together.
Yeah,
like that's, you know, there's not going to be any conversation if they win in that way.
They're gonna do it.
But you know, when it comes to like Muslims or what have you, it does start to get a little bit more shaky, because you are also talking about that largely is that kind of immigrant population after the Hart-Celler Act. And I don't think they ultimately want the same kind of America. So it would have to be an extremely temporary alliance and very situational. But if the situation had to permit it, I certainly wouldn't slap the hand of someone where we were just trying to like fight a bill or fight an act that's like, if these people win, we're just all going to be in jail. You know what I mean? Like, It's like very down to the wire in that way.
Or no, I think what's more likely going to happen, and I'm not trying to freak anybody out, that yourself or anyone else that might watch this, literally, I think it's October 19th, 2025. I think sometime by early 2026, they will strike Iran again. They will bomb someone else, some other Muslim country. The genocide in Gaza will get worse, and they will want American troops to go over and die for them. Guarantee it. I guarantee you that's what's going to happen. So in that case, man, you know, the TradCaths, the Manosphere, the Islamists, I got you. We're marching into this fucking thing together, man.
Yeah. No, definitely. And in that fight, dude, 100%, we definitely got to stay together in that fight, because it's just, if something like that goes through, I mean, that would just be the end. That would be terrible.
Yeah. Oh yeah, another like Iraq war, and Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. They have a ground force. I mean,
oh yeah,
we would need a ground force, they said, of about 400,000 troops. I think that's all of our troops. I tried to join the military. They ended up disqualifying me. Which I love how they complain about how they can't find enough troops. I'm like, I was right here. You didn't want to take me. So, you know, there was some secret missions, because Spanish is my second language, and then I'm also learning Russian and Arabic right now. So they were going to deploy me to Latin America primarily for some secret missions, you know. Doing God knows what, I don't know. They didn't tell me. I didn't get to that point. They found some health defects, and then they said, yeah, you can't serve. I'm like, okay, well, there goes the next 5 years of my life. What am I going to do now? So it is what it is, though.
Right.
Now at least I don't have to go to Yemen. I don't have to go to Iran. I don't have to go die for another country that's not my country, right? And a country that, albeit, has had some good leaders, it's had some shitty leaders. You know, a country, genuinely, I have to say, though, that no matter who is in it, no matter what skin color, no matter what God they pray to, it'll always be my home, man. You know? And I know you feel that way too, Connor. So, hey, man, it was nice sitting down with you. And let me know if you ever want to do a sequel or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely, Nate. I'd be honored, man. Thank you so much for having me on. This was great.
You too, bro.
Hey, you have a